And I've
What's
got
that? Coffee in the
something
cup?
else. Yeah, yeah, I've got something else that goes on for a few hours after this as well. So, um, but that's my own fault for accepting things back to back. Okay, welcome everyone to the March 2025 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I think we definitely have a Stephen and an Aresh here. If you guys just want to give a quick hello, but I'm not
Hello.
sure if Jeroen's making it today. We haven't heard from him.
It's probably
So,
impacted with daylight savings.
okay.
Nice.
So we might as well just sort of get on with things here today. So in terms of our agenda, we've got a nice, straightforward agenda today. We're not trying to cover multiple topics, etc. Instead, it's really just having a quick look, and maybe for some of you, potentially a first look at Security Copilot. Now, I guess the main thing here that we sort of probably should state in advance, and I'm pretty sure it was somewhere in the meetup details, was that we'll look at it mostly through an Intune lens as opposed to trying to sort of look at all of the different things that Security Copilot can do. But we'll still take a look at a few other things just to sort of round it out a bit rather than sort of trying to be hyper-focused. So I guess just the first thing then is it looks like we've got a few new people on the call this month. So if you're comfortable unmuting to do an introduction, or alternatively, if you want to drop an introduction into chat, please feel free to do so. If you'd rather sit there, sit behind the scenes and be quiet, that is also okay. And it looks like we've got some typing.
Hey everyone, I'm new to this group. I'm a
Hello.
software transparency BA, but I want to learn more.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for joining. And I think looks like Dev and Sam are typing in, so we'll give them a minute or so.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Sasha. Just joined this group because I work at a school and help desk, so a private school in Melbourne called St Michael's. So I work at that school. So just joined this just to understand Security Copilot, because we do use a lot of Intune, just to understand it a little bit better, and things that I can take back to my current role.
Okay, and so thanks. So hopefully, you get to see a few things that you like. Dev is on the train, so he doesn't want to share train noises with us. So thank you very much for that. Our ears probably appreciate not hearing some of that background noise. Now, in terms of upcoming events, I think it's if there's anything else anybody wants to add, just let me know. But probably just the main one that has just officially been announced / confirmed is Microsoft Build. So that's Seattle, but also online. In terms of, I guess, relevance to the things we generally talk about, like my guess here is based on just what's happening in general, my assumption here is going to be, there'll probably be things around, Copilot plus PCs, NPUs on devices, etc., are probably going to be the topics of most interest for me at this event. So I'll be doing some lab support there. So I'll try to maneuver myself to get into the labs that are of interest to me, if possible. That's definitely not always possible, but I'm just sort of hoping, like, I don't sort of shuffle things around and then find out, oh, it's a repeat of the one that I was at in Ignite last year. But otherwise, like, again, like, no surprise, it's going to be AI. AI this or AI that in one form or another for a lot of the content. And I think I think all they've really done so far is sort of, said, hey, here are the dates. These dates are confirmed. No agenda, no schedule, session lists, things are like along those lines just yet. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if there's anything that looks like a must-view session coming up. Any other events that anyone's aware of that might be too late to add for this month, but potentially to add in for next month?
I think the recordings for the takeoff should be now available. So feel free to, because obviously when they happen, it's not in a friendly time zone for us, but now they should be all available for your consumption at your leisure.
They were available right away from the day that they came out.
I see.
Well, they should have been.
So let's play a little game here. One of the mornings it was on, that it was running last week, I turned the television on and I thought, oh, let's see what new and exciting things are on Intune. And it showed that a session was live. What session was it and who was it presenting?
Well, it was definitely Wednesday.
I don't know how well my finger is tracking to pointing at Steve, but I didn't even need to open the session. I looked at the session title and said, I bet this is Steve, because it was Kiosk.
Kiosk. Yeah.
But I did click on it and it's like, hey, it's Steve talking about Kiosk. I don't need to watch that because Steve likes to talk about Kiosk.
Yes. It was actually a really good session. Where we covered off a couple of scenarios that are emerging that people didn't realize you could do, which the primary one being if you enter log on, single sign on into Edge, you can actually sign in and pass your credentials through by just setting 2 settings.
Maybe I should go and watch the recording.
Yeah. Because by default, if you're using kiosk mode for Edge, it goes into in private mode. And look, I'm talking about kiosk again.
Workspace, we did that, right? I remember the session in Workspace Ninja, you showcase that.
Yes. So Workplace Ninja is literally the session that I did in Sydney is the session that I did for Tech Takeoff.
Nice.
But it'll get rehashed for MMS, which is the second week of May.
Yeah. Well, if you've got something that's good, that's well received, it works, it's current, like why would you pull it out of rotation? There's no point.
Well, so for MMS, we'll have Terry, who's the feature PM, presenting with me.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really it then in terms of like the introductions and getting things started. So we wanted to sort of keep the focus here quite simple on Security Copilot. So I've just sort of got a few slides in here, just kind of, I think, just to try to address some of the questions that normally come up, like when you start talking about Security Copilot. There tend to be some like fairly common, or I don't want to say predictable, but generally questions that people will eventually say, oh, by the way, what about this? What about that? And as you can see in here, we're sort of focusing on the Copilot in Intune experience. Now, the embedded versus standalone, that will make more sense in a couple of slides' time. But if we just sort of jump in, first of all, with the requirements and the deployment. So just the important starting point here is that it's something that requires an Azure subscription, and it is consumption-based. Now, when you go through and deploy, you're basically deploying security compute units. So let me just go through the process of doing this as we talk. Now, the good news here is that deploying, deleting, redeploying Security Copilot is a pretty quick process. It's not something that, it's not like other Copilots, et cetera, or other Gen AI solutions where you need it to be running for an extended time period to learn about your environment and start, assembling different bits of content from MS Graph or whatever. In this case, it's something where like the content sources that it's using are your log files, and it's not trying to interpret them on its own. Instead, it's something where we are telling it exactly what we want it to do. So to start off with, I'm not doing the demonstration for provisioning the way I'd normally do it because it's bombing out when I try to do it the way I wanted to do it, and I haven't had time to investigate it yet. But basically, this kind of gives an alternative approach where we can see that there is an Azure element to this where or there could be an Azure element to it. So this bit here that I'm doing in Azure is optional. We could do it in different ways. Now, let's just talk about what kind of subscription should you use for this. If you've got a subscription that you can apply caps and limits, etc., to something that's not going to eat all your consumption and then kill a bunch of other resources when usage is exceeded. When you're playing around with this, it's probably a good idea to approach it that way. And the reason is that it's really easy for the costs of this to creep up on you if you're not paying attention to it and I guess this guidance is really in your own dev test kind of environment, like in a production environment where basically things are sort of you're being invoiced on a monthly basis, etc. Bit of a different conversation there. Now let's just see if it allows me to use this nice capacity name, Copilot for Security AU. I'll get rid of the TF and I'll add in MMUG. I don't want it to be in the US. I want it to be in Australia. Now, here's something that's just sort of worth talking about quickly, because it's something that also applies to things like Microsoft 365 Copilot as well, which is if there's like capacity, sorry, I won't say capacity issues. If the region that you are in is busy, can Copilot send prompts elsewhere in the world to other Azure regions? Now, here, all it's doing is sending the prompt. It's not sending the data, etc., to be stored. So obviously, when the prompt is when things are being processed, yes, data is going to travel between different regions. But in this case, it's generally something that we want to say yes to. For the capacity region, we'll say Australia East. Now, here's where we start getting to the fun part. So this is something that when we deploy it, it's running at a minimum cost of $4 US per hour, which brings us to just under $3,000 US per month. So if I deploy 2 instances, it doubles. 3 instances, it triples, etc. And we'll sort of take a look at what the security compute units per hour, etc., means as we go through a few scenarios. And you can sort of see what the actual usage is pretty quickly after you've executed a few things. So I'll just say that I'm okay with that. Now, I'll just quickly hit review and create on that one, and then just switch back to the slide quickly while it goes through and actually provisions. So here you can see it's going to provision 1 SCU. Now, if we go back to the slide here, basically there's that $4 per hour. Now, an announcement that just came out is saying that you've got the ability basically to use burst capacity. So you could say, well, if I go above that and I want things to keep running at the required speed, for example, I want to boost into overage security compute units. So this is something that then these kick in at $6 per hour. Now, until we see what the overall user interface is, etc., for this, I'm pretty sure that there is going to be a maximum boost. So you might say, I want to be able to go from 1 to 4, for example. And the way that these compute units are charged is it's not per complete hour, it's per hour or part thereof. So some of the things that I'll test once once this goes live is, some of the concerns that I've got here is that it's something where these costs could sort of we could basically keep running at the upper end of that capacity if we're not really focused on what the real usage should be. So I think one of the things that people will probably discover after they are using the overage SCUs for a while is they'll probably realize, hey, we probably should actually bump up our baseline until to something a little bit higher. Now, something else that I've noticed over the last few weeks, so before this announcement came out, one of the things that I noticed was that I've been doing a lot of my testing, etc., with a single SCU and not really running into too many issues in terms of it sort of saying, hey, you've used too much capacity, you have to wait a while. But over the last few weeks, I started seeing a bit more of that kind of behavior. And I'm like, okay, maybe in the future I need to start deploying 2 instances, things along those lines. But my guess here, though, is that they've kind of just been a little bit looser with the rules up until this point. And now that people are starting to use the service, they're saying, hey, we've basically been giving you free capacity over and above what you're paying for. So, basically now time to start, getting something that's a bit more relevant for you. So here I've just sort of jumped over into the Security Copilot, or it pushed me into launch the Security Copilot window where now I can say, I can tell it what capacity I want to use, and I can just hit apply. And now within minutes, this is something where I'll be able to go through and start interacting with things in here. So we'll just sort of let it sit here for a while, and we'll come back to it in a few minutes. So here, so we can sort of monitor the Security Copilot capacity that's in use. I'll show you some of these things. And as I mentioned, it's like over here, the deployment and usage, it's, you could just be using it for minutes. So if you're boosting from 1 unit to 2 units, or 1 unit to 4 units, and that boost is only happening for a couple of minutes, you'll still be charged, from my understanding with the boost, the overage is you'll still be charged for the full amount because it's charged at a per hour rate. So it's one of the, and that's one of the reasons why I think people will sort of test this out with the overages, thinking the overage is a good way to go. But in reality, I think just sort of having a higher amount of default capacity available might end up being a better way of doing things. So let's go back over to here and let's just test something out quickly in here. And we'll say, let's just choose the Intune plugin. We'll choose one of the prompts that's built in, and I'll just drop in autopilot VM1, and we'll just sort of run that query to begin with. So this is just to test to make sure that it's up and running. So in this case, you can see, yep, it's running. It chose Intune. It's got the group memberships, and now it's going through and preparing that response. So basically, that sort of shows you how quickly this gets up and running. So compared to the guidance that you see with things like Microsoft 365 Copilot, where they're saying, it has to, build the semantic index, it has to do this, it has to do that, etc. In this case, it's something where, it's not instantaneous, but we're really talking about minutes for it to actually deploy and be usable. So that also means that in a dev test environment, there's not really any harm in you deleting it and then recreating it. So even things like any of the prompts that you've used previously, or if you've created prompt books or anything like that, all of those things are still going to be sitting in here. So it's not deleting the entire Security Copilot environment, it's just deleting the capacity that you're using. So it's actually a lot nicer to jump in and out of than initially I was thinking it wouldn't sort of be storing any of that history, but that stuff just seems to hang around at least for a while. Okay, so if we continue on in here and just sort of talk about the Copilot specific pieces in here. So when we talk about embedded, this is where we talk about it being embedded into the portal for certain services. Now, so in terms of what portals it's integrated with, like at the moment, it integrates, there's a small amount of integration in the Entra ID portal around risky users. There's integration into quite a few services in Purview. There's integration into the Defender XDR portal, as well as into some other parts of Azure. Now, as we take a look at some of these things, if we sort of jump in and let's switch over to Intune quickly in here. Let's just go to, so the first thing that I'll show you is an example that one that I don't necessarily think it's the best example, but it's kind of just a good one to start off with in terms of, kind of the starting point for what it can do, and just a bit more as a conversation starter. So if I say I want to create a new policy, say Win 10 or later, and jump in, and I'll give it a very memorable name. And then once we start getting into the different settings, notice now that we've got that Copilot icon sitting in here. Now, in this case, some of these are things that I my personal view here is that these don't really justify the usage of Security Copilot. Now, yes, it's convenient to have it there, but there's other stuff we should be using Security Copilot for. Because if I click on this and say, hey, tell me what custom compliance is, there's a lot of other places I could get that information. I could ask Microsoft Copilot. I could go out to the free Copilot service. I could go out to ChatGPT, and all of those would be able to go through and generate a response for me. But in terms of just the convenience of having it sitting in here in the portal, ready to go. Now, where I think the value really starts to creep in here is that there's nothing special about this. There's nothing that's particularly sensitive to the organization, that if this is ingested by another AI solution that then is using it to learn more things, this is all stuff that's publicly available. But as soon as we start entering in things that are very, very specific to our organization, maybe that's where we don't want that stuff ending up outside of, outside of something like Security Copilot. So here you can see that, and if you've used, Microsoft Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, Copilot Chat, etc., and you'll see similarities here where we ask it a question, it gives us a response. Here it's giving us the references. So, would you like to know more? Click here. Here are the things that we've used as evidence. Then we can say, how could this? It's giving us additional prompts. Does Microsoft recommend any particular value for this setting? So this is just a way that we could go through and get some of that information. But again, I don't really see Security Copilot being something that is going over and beyond what another Gen AI solution could be doing. I guess the thing that's working in its favor here is that it's trying to limit the scope of what it's bringing in. It's trying to stay focused on security-related content in here. So here, when we're talking about it being embedded in the in the portal or the embedded experience, it's basically here where we start seeing it. So I wanted to start off with this one because it's a fairly weak example. If somebody tried to sell me on Security Copilot with this, I'd be like, well, okay, I am pretty certain that I could go out to quite a few different websites and get a lot of really good information on what BitLocker is and what BitLocker settings are. But if we sort of jump in and let's take a look at another example in here. So let's get rid of that. Then if we jump into, let's just say, configuration, and I'll choose, let's choose this one, attack surface reduction, endpoint security policy. So once we start getting into these, if we jump in and we take a look at the settings in here, then all of a sudden this is where, potentially it's something where, oh, okay, this one's interesting. Copilot's not actually popping up in this one. I definitely chose the wrong thing to demonstrate there. Maybe let me just try something else. Let me choose custom and edit. Okay, so in this case, okay, so we do have that Copilot icon here. So from here, because it's a custom policy, let's go through and see. So in this case, the first thing to notice is that it's kind of just giving a very generic OMA URI settings response. It's like, well, I know what OMA URI settings are. It's actually the policy that I'm interested in. So this is an example of something where it's not quite, it's not quite doing the things that I wanted to do through here. And also when it comes to the prompts, we'll just sort of let this one finish. It's showing that, that bit of information. But notice when it comes to the prompts that if I'm interacting with it in this way, I can't jump in and enter my own prompt. I can't put in a variation of these prompts. I have to just follow the prompts that are in there. So so in some ways you can sort of see that, hey, it's still kind of restricted when we're interacting with it through this kind of embedded experience. Now, where it starts to get much more interesting, though, is so right now, let me sort of just, I've got to be careful with some of the things I'm saying here. So a lot of what's here, it's something where you can go, okay, I can see the potential of where this is going. But in terms of what's the way that you could sort of start getting some, some good information out of this to begin with? This is really where going into that standalone mode. So that securitycopilot.microsoft.com portal that I showed you just for testing things to begin with, that ends up being like probably the better way to start interacting with this. So if we just sort of have a quick look in here, getting insights across all the different services that are integrated. So we're focused on Intune, but a lot of the Defender XDR stuff, Entra ID, Purview. So basically, the way that this is positioned versus the Intune embedded or the Purview embedded experience is that it would be the device admin who's using the Intune embedded experience. It would be the compliance admin who's using the Purview embedded experience as examples. But then when it comes to the standalone experience, one of the things that they kind of push with this is that, somebody from, in this, basically in the SOC might be the person who doesn't necessarily care about what technology they're retrieving responses from. They just want to get to a prompt and start asking questions. So if we jump back over to the portal here, or the Security Copilot standalone experience. So here you can see that it's things like, where I was actually able to go through and, choose an existing prompt. But the other powerful thing here, and this is kind of what we're already used to with Gen AI solutions, is we're used to the idea of being able to enter our own prompts, rather than it being a guided experience where we're getting a limited number of selections. Instead, here what we're getting is the ability to go through and start typing in, what it is we're actually, really, interested in. So in here, just for ideas, let's go back to Security Copilot. We'll stick with Intune for now. Try that again. Okay, so before we jump in and ask the next question, let's just jump in and take a look at the usage monitoring, just so we can see what's going on in here. Now, what you can see here is that, okay, I haven't done too much just yet, but you can basically see that, something that I have already entered in here is basically already sort of going across the line in terms of what what the capacity is. Now, it allowed me to do that. What you'll generally find is that, they've got this little disclaimer. Some usage beyond what you've purchased might be allowed at times. But what you'll find is that if you keep running longer prompts or prompt books, and this starts shooting up from blue to orange to red, it will start basically rate restricting what you can do in there. So let me just check something quickly so that we can do a few different demonstrations, and I'll just sort of need to grab an alert ID, and then we can switch back to that demonstration. Okay, 742 seems like a good option. Yep, that looks good to me. So let's stick with 742. Okay, so we'll come back to that 742 in a moment. But if we sort of just jump back out and take a look at some of the other Copilot suggestions around Intune prompts. Now, one of the ones that's in here that I quite like is asking it to compare two devices to each other, so that you've got one device that's behaving properly, another device that's not quite behaving the way that you expect. So let's just see if that's one of the default prompts that's in here. So it doesn't look as if it's one of the default ones, but let's try compare Autopilot VM1 to Autopilot VM2. Hopefully it has got the ability to understand that. Maybe I needed to tell it to compare the devices. So here you can see for the sources, it's basically going through the different logs, etc., that I've got connected in here. So that took 12 seconds, whereas I'm sure if I use compare the following two devices, then it would have seen devices and hopefully jumped over to Intune a bit faster. But what you can see in here is it goes through and it starts looking at those machines. And if I want to go through and export this information out to Excel, let's do that. Actually, did it add more in? No, not yet. Let's open that up so we can see what else it's brought in there. Okay, so from there, let's just zoom in and scroll down a bit. So from here, you can start seeing that it will do things like, showing the amount of storage, what's in use. They're both VMs, but you'll start, as we scroll through, we'll start sort of noticing, okay, in this case, it doesn't seem to be going through and showing the information I was hoping for. So one of the, I guess the side effects of this being Gen AI based is that if I go through and ask it the same question again, so let me just do that again now. Did it just repeat the same response, or no, it's processing it again? Now, let's just open this one up, see if it's still the same. So what you'll find with this is that it's Gen AI, so it's not always going to give you the same results. But in this case, for whatever reason, it has decided to do that. So let's run it again, including hardware differences and installed applications. Let's see if it can pick that up. Now, I guess this is also a good class in creating good starting prompts. So starting with a broad prompt to begin with is no guarantee that you're going to get results that match. So all of a sudden we can start seeing here that, okay, the Autopilot VM has 105 apps, Autopilot VM2 has 107 discovered apps. Then when we take a look at the hardware differences, one's got 64 gig, the other one's got 8 gig. Storage is the same, one's encrypted, one's not encrypted. But then you can start seeing that, me just sort of adding a couple of extra things into the prompt. All of a sudden, we start getting a lot of additional information out of it. Now, the reality with this kind of thing is if like someone's going, well, hang on, can't we start extracting some of this stuff out of Intune ourselves? And it's like, yeah, you can. If you know what you're doing, if you've got access to the Intune portal, etc. But even here, like the other thing that I sort of should have mentioned is this is only going to return the results that of things that you have permission to access. So if I didn't have the appropriate Intune permissions, I would not be able to access this information. The same way that if I'm trying to access, purview policies, DLP alerts, things along those lines, it's only going to show me things that I've got permission to see. So if I don't have permission, it's not going to give them to me just because I've got access to the security Copilot prompt in here. Now, as we sort of take a look then at a few of the other pieces in here, let's take a look at this, see if that, I know that's that same table. If we take a look at some of the data sources that we've got in here, so obviously there's quite a few different Microsoft data sources that we can choose. Now, probably the one that I like the most, and I'll demonstrate this one next, is the Defender XDR integration, but Sentinel integration is in there. Now, notice on the Sentinel side that there's a gear icon. So we basically have to tell it which of our Sentinel instances we actually want it to take a look at in this case. So if we've got multiple subscriptions, multiple instances, this is going to allow us to go through and tell it which is the one that we actually want it to connect into. And so threat intelligence integration. Now here on the threat intelligence side, the threat intelligence, even if you're getting it through Defender XDR or you're getting it through Sentinel or Defender for Cloud, you also get it included with Sentinel. So it's just something that when you're when you're enabling Security Copilot, you get Microsoft Threat Intelligence as part of that. Now in here, there should actually be two different choices or two different things mentioned in here. The first one is the natural language to KQL for advanced hunting. So we can jump into that in a moment. But in this case, if we're doing the hunting in Defender XDR or Sentinel, so if I'm doing, in the Defender portal, then where it's saying KQL, that means it's going to be using Custo query language. If I'm doing natural language to KQL in the Purview portal, it's going to do keyword query language for me. So but in this case, this one does seem to be more specific to the Custo QL side. Now, something that was just added in preview very recently was the Surface Management portal as well. Now, in my tenant, let's have a look. I don't think there's really anything too interesting on the Surface side, but let's just jump in and have a look. Now here we've got Copilot. So once again, though, notice here that it's suggesting prompts for you. So list all of my Surface device models end of service date. So show me how far out of date the devices are that I've got in here. And I think what have I got? Now it's telling me I've got one device. Oh, actually, no, there we go. We've got 4 different devices. Oh, okay, Surface Go 4 and Surface Go 3 are both actually still officially supported. So I didn't realize that I had any Surface devices that were still supported. Why have I got so many Surface Go's? What happened there? Must have been a fire sale somewhere. Okay, so this is just sort of giving you some of that, some quick summary information in there. Now, if I say troubleshoot Surface devices, all it's really doing is sort of walking me through some common scenarios, and I'll say Surface Go model 3, hit submit, and it will just sort of go through and make some general recommendations in here. Now, again, with some of these things, I guess with this, some of this is stuff that, yes, it's good that Security Copilot can do this. And if we've already got Security Copilot, and this is stuff that works within the capacity that we've been allocated, no problem. But you can see here that some of these kinds of things, it's kind of something that other Gen AI solutions could provide. But it's really once we start doing things like I was doing, where I was typing in specific computer names or asking about specific, or actually we can sort of take a look at that now. If I jump over to KQL. So if we go into hunting and advanced hunting, then this is where you can see in here, we'll let that populate. If we jump up, and I was wondering where Copilot was, it just took a little bit of time to pop in. Now let's pretend you didn't see these ones here. So if I say, show me all sign-ins for the last week. Now, that's a kind of a terrible prompt to enter in a production environment because the number of responses is going to be pretty overwhelming. Here we go. We've already hit a capacity issue in there. So when you see that, what's the first thing you should do? Well, they're suggesting you should click on learn about usage limits, but I'd rather do the following. I'd rather jump back over to Security Copilot, jump into the, let's close that. Let's jump into the usage monitoring and see what's been going on in here. Okay, so at that point, you can see that the rate at which I've been burning through here is basically I've shot above 4. So you can see here that it's started to apply the brakes to me. Now, if I jump back over to here and say regenerate, given enough time, it will go through and perform that task. But what you can sort of see here is that it's pretty easy for us to, if I sort of really undersize it, it's really easy for me to hit those limits. So let's jump back into Security Copilot. Let's change the base unit and we'll bump it up to, let's try 2 to begin with, even though I can already see that 2 is probably going to be a bit below what I need. Hopefully that's given it enough of a wake-up call to, to let me try something in here. Okay. Let's take it further. That's getting close to 6. Let me bump it up to 6, and I will need to remember to delete this after this session. Otherwise, I will be burning through credits like crazy. So let's just try that again. Now I'll click regenerate. If it doesn't immediately respond in here, then I'll just hit refresh here and just try it again. Now, this is where you can start seeing that, while for playing around with it, undersizing it, not the end of the world, but in a production environment and people are investigating, looking at real-time issues that are occurring, you don't really want something like that to be happening in here. So let's see. Okay, no, it's still complaining. So it doesn't look as if it's been bumped up to the 6 SCUs yet. So we'll just let that run in the background. But the other thing that I probably should really be doing with this is, okay, the chances are I should never really be looking for all sign-ins, especially for the last week. So instead, let's say for me, over the last 24 hours. So that's the other thing to sort of think about here is that sort of by having tighter searches, applying filtering in the prompt that you're going to put in is going to prevent it from getting overwhelmed. Now, in this case, it's normally it sort of will let me back in a lot faster than this. So I'll just do the only appropriate thing and keep clicking on regenerate and see what happens. Now, back here, let's just refresh that and we'll see what's happening. Okay, so we can see that, okay, it's recognizing that I've bumped up. I'm above what I've been using before. So I'll just sort of try this one more time and then we can sort of just move over to some other conversation pieces rather than me just sort of hitting refresh on this. So yeah, so just here, just to sort of highlight that it's easy enough for you to jump in here. You can also see why right sizing this in production or allowing for overages is going to be important. If somebody's investigating something, then you don't want them hitting this kind of issue where it's like, yeah, I couldn't complete the thing you wanted because the company is trying to save money. So in this case, let's sort of shift the conversation a bit so we can jump in and try this again in a moment. But if we start thinking about the scenarios where this kind of thing is going to be useful, or I guess one of the main use cases you'll see around using Security Copilot, a lot of it is around filling the skills gap that a lot of organizations have got when it comes to security and compliance. So it's not necessarily that organizations can't get a hold of people who've got some idea about securing environments, etc. But it's the scope or the breadth of the solutions that people are expected to be able to support, even if they've had no prior exposure to them. So the idea here is that being able to sort of bring people on board who who have some idea of certain technologies, but not necessarily all of the different technologies that an organization is using, and being able to jump in and at least start getting some kind of results quite quickly. And at the Security Copilot prompt, you saw that we were able to jump in pretty much straight away, take a look at some of the prompts, and get some things up and running immediately. Now, I just want to try my advanced hunting query one more time before I sort of switch over to something else. Normally, this is something where it basically should allow me back in a lot faster than this, but it is, because I've got an audience, it's not cooperating with me today. And I don't want to push my capacity up any higher than it already is. Okay, so let's just jump back to the Security Copilot portal. And what was that magic number that we had over in advance in incidents? It was 742. Okay, so let's choose a different, actually, let's go to a different option here. Instead of doing a prompt and just sort of getting it to respond to one thing, now I really want to cause havoc with it. I want to chain different things together. So in this case, it's saying, a Microsoft 365 Defender incident investigation. So get a report about a specific incident with related alerts, reputation scores, users, and devices. Now, in this case, we can see it's a 7-prompt sequence. Now, this working now, while it's complaining about my usage to date, I don't expect this to work, but I am more than happy to fail in front of everyone. I do these things so that you don't have to. So what was it? It was 743. Oh, sorry, 742. Okay, so let's put in 742 and we'll hit submit. Now, sometimes what you'll see here, and like we could even see it in this case, is that it may go through and process some of it, get partway through it, and then complain that, hey, you've run out, basically you've run out of security compute units in this case. So let's sort of expand some of these. It's saying, okay, it's saying, okay, we're looking at that. We're processing the request. So let's take a look at what it has. Okay, it hasn't really done too much. Okay, so here it's going through and it is actually generating that. So that's actually getting further than I thought. So there's something a little bit weird going over here on the Defender side in that embedded experience, but that's okay. So here, if we sort of take a look, it's gone through, it's provided that summary. And as you can see here, it's working through all the different steps or all of the different prompts that are part of that prompt book. And here you can see that there's no reputation data. It's going through looking at some of the other things. So basically, it's seeing that it was a graph request giving information. So here, what it's doing is tying together a lot of different information that technically, this information sits inside of Defender. It sits inside of Intune. But having this pull it all together for you is really where, the value of that starts to come through. And you can see in all of these locations, we can go through, we can export the response, we could copy it if it's something that we want to, paste into, a report that we're building, things along those lines. Now, once we get to this final one here, this is where you can start seeing where some of the additional value comes into play here. So write an executive report summarizing this investigation. It should be suited for a non-technical audience. So basically, someone from the SOC wants a report generated from the people who want to know what happened, what was the incident, what are the things that are going on with that. So here it goes through, it's completed it, it's kept it pretty simple. And again, we can just go through and say, let's export that response. In this case, it's going to export it out to Word. So if I open this up, then this is just going to be a pretty brief summary. But in this case, it's something, that may be all that we really wanted. I don't want to spend, 20 minutes going, what should I include? What wording should I have in there? And keep going back to it and just waste a lot of time because I want it to be readable. It's like, let's just go through and use this as the starting point and make sure that the language is appropriate for the audience that I'm pushing it through to in that case. So I guess when we look at this element, this is where it's sort of crossing into the territory of the kinds of, getting it to write content the way that something like Microsoft 365 Copilot would. But in this case, it's getting access to, basically it's going through and looking at the activity from the different log files, tying all this stuff together to be able to generate that report for us. But we can go through and generate the response, export those different responses, etc., that we saw elsewhere. So if there are other things in here that we thought were useful, so in this case, if I want to sort of get something to do with the entities, let's just export that and we'll open that one up as well. And so there I've got a simple list. So if I need to share the list with somebody, nice, easy way of going through and doing that. So this is the kind of thing where you can sort of see that where some of those potential benefits really start to come through. So even though someone working in the SOC may have the appropriate skills to pull together the information, formatting the information in a way that somebody else in the organization could consume it, could be a little bit problematic. But just the ability for this to go through, query multiple data sources quickly, and we've only looked at some of the potential data sources that we could integrate. We've just sort of focused on the Microsoft ones, but then we've got what is it, like 35 third-party integrations that we can make in here as well as, do we want public, web content coming in? Do we have our own add-ins that we want to drop in here as well? So there's a lot that we can do, based on just the capabilities that are in here to begin with. But it's, for me at the moment, like I really see a lot more of the value in this prompt ability here, where we can actually create our own prompts and edit them, reiterate them, etc., as we're used to with Gen AI experiences, versus like right now the let's try advanced hunting again. Let's see if it's happy to let me try it, or if it's still going to complain. Let's go back to hunting, advanced hunting, and please generate some KQL for me. Okay, it's not failing as fast, so it looks like it's actually working in this case. So it just seemed to be stuck for some reason. Like as I was saying, it should have allowed me to come through and respond and start prompting it earlier. Okay, so in this case, you can see it's created that KQL for me. Now I could sort of copy and paste that in, but alternatively, it's integrated. Let's just click on Run Query. It will drop that in, it's running the query, and then we'll see those results pop up over there. And then if I look at this and say, there are other things that I want to test out, if I want to add a location, an IP address, things along those lines, it's pretty easy for me to go through and add those things in. Now, one of the things, unfortunately, that I don't have to demonstrate, there might be a little bit of it that I can demonstrate in here, but let me just check something. I'm just seeing, I don't know if I've got anything left in here that has got a malicious PowerShell script associated with it, because one of the other things that you can get it to do, and I don't have anything in this environment to actually show that, is we can also get it to go through and interpret, interpret what a PowerShell script is doing, for example. So basically, a malicious script was run, and you may be familiar with Bash. You may not have spent a lot of time with PowerShell, but you can go through and tell you what that PowerShell script is doing. So in that case, I don't think I've got any. I don't think any of these samples are actually going to show that. These just seem to be a bit broader overall. Let me just try expanding a few more. It doesn't look as if there's anything PowerShell related in there, unfortunately. No. Okay. So yeah. So again, it's So if we sort of go back to things like it explaining what's happening with an incident, or it explaining what's happening in a PowerShell script, it's going back to the concept of it providing value by people who don't necessarily have all of the skills that they need in the long term, being able to jump in at least starting to get productive, being able to do things like generate the reports, hopefully learn from the content that they're asking for. So the example that we saw over here back with the advanced hunting, let me just say, okay, now there's actually something that I should be smarter with here, but I'll run it like this anyway. Show me the most recent sign-ins for Mark O'Shea. Recent means different things to different people and could be interpreted in different ways each time I run the prompt. But if I just sort of click run on that, it will just sort of make a judgment call as to, at this moment in time, what it thinks recent is. The same way that asking the same person what recent means, within a short time period, or different times of the day, they might give you a completely different response. It might be an hour, it might be a day or 2 days. Now, in this case, we'll be able to see what it interprets in here. So in this case, it doesn't actually seem to, by recent, it doesn't really seem to have made a decision in this case. It's just saying, here are sign-ins, and here are the times. So it saw recent and just sort of said recent is time related, therefore we'll put time generated in here. But important things to take a look at in here is what that logic is that sits behind that. So again, this is where it's going through and explaining, here is why I did what I did. Now, it's not breaking out, for someone who really wants to learn Custo by scratch, or from scratch. This is more telling you what it's doing as opposed to explaining every single detail of it. But just the idea here is that you're looking at this and not just saying that's fantastic, run it. What we want here is for people to also be benefiting from this, so that if they look at this and go, oh, hang on, I actually want something a bit different, but let's just sort of run this. We'll see what happens. We can see what the results are in this case. And okay, so far it's telling me no results, which does not seem to be accurate unless it hasn't actually run that. But I'm pretty sure that it said that it did run it. Now, in this case, this did that first one work? Now the thing, okay, I think I know what's happening here. For some reason, I think it's using a real name and saying that's the UPN. Let's just try this and see if that works. Okay, so in that case, yeah, I had to troubleshoot what it issued there for me. So let's try this second one as well. Let's just copy that. And again, what this is kind of showing you here is that, there's still, where is it? If we sort of scroll down, AI generated content may be incorrect. Check it for accuracy. I'm glad I did check it for accuracy, because we were able to figure out what was actually happening in these cases, or at least in that first one we can see what it was. But again, it's one of those things where we can take a look at this and start learning a bit more about the content. If we're looking at the summary reports, the idea is to try to learn from what they're based on. So Yeah, so with this is sort of just sort of giving you like a bit of an idea of what, what some of the types of capabilities are. But right now, like overall, I think, apart from like the KQL stuff is pretty cool, but overall, I really view that it's the prompts, either the prompts that are built in, the prompt books that are built in, or the prompts and prompt books that you start building yourself that are really, the what I view as really the more usable or the more easily justified parts of Security Copilot at the moment. And if we take a look at the prompt books, we've got, what is it, 5 prompt books built in. And the idea here is we can go through, we can create our own prompt books. We can sort of take a look at other prompt sources in here as well. So there's a lot that you can poke around with in here. But if somebody says, "Oh, I want Security Copilot just for Intune," for me, that's a bit of a hard ask. Like for me, it's like, okay, do you have Intune and Defender for endpoint, for example? Then that's where things, jumping into Defender XDR, etc. So basically, if it's something where somebody only wants to use it with one particular data source, like unless that's the data source that's absolutely critical for your organization, it's a bit harder to justify. But if somebody says, look, I think Sasha said that you were at Sasha said that he was at a school with, and looking at this stuff. So that's where you could go, okay, well, if it's a school, fingers crossed, maybe they've got like an M365 A5, which means they're getting most, if not all, of the Defender XDR capabilities. Don't quote me on that. I haven't looked closely at the A plans in a while. And that's really where you get the most value out of this, as opposed to Steve's laughing. I'm sure there's probably something obvious that's missing from an A5 plan that I assume would be in there. As long as it's Defender for identity, I can live with that being missing. But otherwise here, it's when it's starting to tie information together. So in that case, with that Defender incident investigation, it went through, and if we jump in and we take a look at the details of this, then we can get an idea of the way that we can start chaining the different prompts together, and basically telling it that, and we even saw as it went through this, is even though I told it to look at Defender, it was also looking for relevant information over on the Intune side as well. So using this prompt as a way to tie together information across different data sources, or security or compliance data sources, that's really what I think is the strength of Copilot or Security Copilot right now. Now, obviously, over time, the integration into the different portals is something where, I guess there's not really any limit to what can be done there, but it just seems for now, this is really where we see the best results overall. And for me, just being able to craft my own prompts and to refine them to get the results I want, that's what I'm used to with things with Copilot in the name. So this is generally where I'd be going to get things done. So that's pretty much like all that I really wanted to sort of cover here today. But just to sort of show a few other things, like basically we could also say, well, show me different prompts or prompt books based on the role. I showed you, show me, different prompts based on different plugins, etc. So the thing with this is, just making sure that if you are just running it in a dev test environment, that you aren't just going through and deploying it like this, that you're also putting something in place that is going to come through and clean up the capacity afterwards as well for you, because that's going to be $24 US per hour that this continues to charge me from this point if I don't go through and hit the magic delete button there. But as you saw, I can delete this, and then if I go through and redeploy it, it's something that is going to be up and running again in minutes for me. So so that's one of the things that I really do like about this, is you can dip your toe in it, run away from it if you get scared, delete it, come back in, and it's ready to go again immediately for you. So any questions, comments, etc. On this?
Very informative.
Yes, one question mark.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you encourage any hallucinations when you review the incident report made by AI, made by the Copilot?
So yes, so this is one of the things with this is that they've deliberately done a few things with this where they have basically tried to keep it more direct than something like Copilot or M365 Copilot or ChatGPT, where basically more of the end user oriented tools, how they tend to encourage you to ask more questions and they interact with you. What you'll notice here is that basically you're interacting with it in a very factual, blunt manner. So in this case, it's something where there's a lot of protections that Microsoft puts in place in basically part of their responsible AI guidance and framework is there are certain restrictions that they'll put in place that someone will go, well, hang on, why aren't the Microsoft solutions giving me the same responses as even ChatGPT or other Gen AI solutions? And part of that is going to be tied into basically additional corporate controls that are being put into place to prevent some of that stuff from happening. So effectively, in a lot of cases, you could sort of think of it is in that it's when you sort of look at things like ChatGPT, where it's saying, would you like the answer to be more accurate or more creative or things along those lines? They're not presenting those options here to you. Now, you can still draw some of that stuff out. So if you're saying, the way that we were able to get it to generate a report, like I could tell it to, generate a report and make it informal or make it sound friendly, make it sound more business-like, things along those lines. But there's more and more protections are being built in to prevent not to eliminate but to try to prevent hallucinations. But there's always that little disclaimer in there that AI solutions let's just open this up again. AI generated content may be incorrect. Check it for accuracy. But there are more controls in here that are going to prevent some of that let's say it getting a little bit too creative on the creative side because basically it has started hallucinating. So so more controls over that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The Gusto demonstration is amazing. I'm speechless. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. So looking at Alvin's question about the pricing, etc., and is this something that you should sort of basically run during business hours? And look, I think a lot of organizations are probably looking really closely at things like that, or they're going, well, hang on, what if we just leave one SCU running 24 hours a day, but we allow we basically will use whatever automation approach we want in Azure to go through and scale it up or scale it down, etc., at different times of the day or week. But as you can see, even if you delete the capacity, as long as the people who need access to it have got the ability to request or deploy capacity themselves easily, like the startup time just isn't all that great. The problem that you're going to have is if it's something where you get a call at 3 a.m. and they're saying, we want a response in 5 minutes. And you're like, well, hang on, I'll have to deploy capacity before I can even start doing it. They're the kind of trade-offs that you'd need to make. So potentially, depending on how much the organization is relying on it for reactive purposes versus proactive purposes, that could also play an impact. If this is something where you're saying, hey, everyone, play around with this during the day, and it might get to the point over time where it's like, we rely really heavily on this, even when there are live attacks, etc., or incidents taking place, then that's where you could sort of start, justifying keeping at least one SCU running constantly so that you get immediate access to it. But yeah, but obviously it's something that you wouldn't want the full capacity that you might need to be running 24/7, every day of the month. That's where things get pretty crazy price-wise very, very early on. Now let's jump back over to this so we can jump back into the usage monitoring again and to see how big did we, oh, there we go. So I was wondering if we broke the 10 barrier. So what did we get? Okay, yeah, so we did actually get up to 10 units there. So you can sort of, but in this case, it's something where you saw that I was sort of going through running, lots of random things after each other, trying to push it up over and above that. But it's, you can sort of see here that, starting off with one and sort of using some simple prompts, you can probably get away with doing it before it complains too much. But then me saying, hey, go through and look up all the logins for this user for the last 30 days, that's a lot of data that it's going to have to go through and process. So even getting better at writing prompts, etc., means that you can keep that level down a lot lower than what I had it at sitting in there. Now I will go through and before I click on delete in here, I just want to check to see if there's anything else anyone wanted to ask about before I hit delete. 5,
You can
4,
go hit delete, Mark.
3, 2, 1, delete. Okay, so
I have a question, side question, like how, is there any sizing calculator as to how many, when you originally deploy, you would need for an enterprise grade kind of
so the thing that I found was that there are determine number of SCU for Security Copilot. Let's just see what shows up there. Because so there is some like some guidance around it, but it's, and I think that one that I clicked on might sort of be a good example of this, is that, they tell you how they're built, they tell you how to manage usage, but they talk about things like the data dimensions to see how they're being used, but there doesn't really seem to be, or at least what I've found so far, I haven't looked too deeply for it, but there doesn't seem to be something that gives a really good overview of how much data needs to be processed for it to do this or that, etc. Now, the other thing I just sort of noticed down here is it says users can expect capacity adjustments to take effect within 30 minutes. That delay that we saw today is one of the longer delays that I've seen. Normally it's something where I've made a change and come back and tried again and it worked, but that could also just be that enough time had passed from when I'd entered that original prompt in there as well. But it's, I'll drop this link in, but, you'll see that it doesn't really, give you like a calculator to, of like, based on the number of users, what data sources they're using, etc. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody sort of builds a calculator. It probably would surprise me if the calculator was an official Microsoft tool.
Gotcha.
Because I guess on the Microsoft side, the answer to every question is going to be, it depends.
Agreed.
Yeah, see, so here, so it tells you how it's billed, but no, I don't want it. I don't want the billing. I want, as you said, how do we actually calculate? How do we get an idea of, what the correct number of SCUs is? And the reality is, it really is just trial and error at the moment. And in most cases, the error will be starting off too small. But financially, that's what's going to make sense for a lot of organizations.
Gotcha.
Okay, anything else from anyone? Okay, if not, just let me stop the recording just so that we can sort of switch over to general discussion. And for anyone who hasn't joined a session previously, once we switch over to the general discussion piece, that's just where like there might be questions that you want to ask, but maybe not have them recorded, might be a bit sensitive, etc. So let me just sort of stop the recording and then just any final questions or just general discussion that you want to have. So let me just stop that there. And